We're talking about equations when we have variables on both sides. So I have some rules that I wrote down about how to do this. So one thing is if you can simplify it at first, please do. So if there's something on the left or something on the right that can be simplified, do that first. Step two, you have two options. You can either choose if you have four terms or um, more than just one term on a side. So like for number one, I only have one term on this side, so I'm not going to follow this rule for this one. But once I get to number three, I have two terms on the left, two terms on the right. So the rule I'm about to tell you is for problems like number three. What you do is you add or subtract whatever the smallest variable is. Now, I just choose the smallest variable to avoid dealing with negatives. You might still have negatives, but you won't have as many. So I always choose the smallest variable, or if you have a problem like numbers 1 and 2, where you have a term that's all by itself already, then we're going to add or subtract the variable that is not by itself. So we want to bring, once we get to number 1, we want to bring that 3w over to the 7w. So we want to combine our w's. And then we would just solve the equation like we normally would. So the only new thing is knowing which variable to choose. So for number one, I'm going to get my variables on the same side. If I move this 7w over, that doesn't really help me because then I don't have anything on the right. So I'm going to move the 3w to the right. Okay, so we get 2 equals 4w. Then divide both sides by 4. To get w equals 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. So don't accidentally put 2, it's 1/2. Number 2, I can simplify this one a little bit first. I can do the distributive property to get 5 plus 2n plus 2 equals 2n. I can combine my like terms with this 5 plus 2 to get 2n plus 7. Okay, so now, again, I want to move the variable that isn't by itself, because if I move this 2n over, then I don't have anything on the right side. So I'm going to move this left one over. And we get 7 equals 2n minus 2n is 0. So 7 equals 0. That is not a true statement. So in this case, it is no solution. There isn't any number that we can plug in and it would work. So if you get to the point where you have two numbers equal to each other and they're obviously not the same number, so 7 does not equal 0, it's no solution. There is no answer for it. For number 3, we have more terms. So you can choose whichever variable you want. I just prefer to choose the smallest variable so I don't have to deal with as many negatives along the way. So the smallest variable is this negative 7a. So I'm going to add that to both sides. So 5a plus 7a is 12a. Bring down your plus 2, bring down the equals, bring down the 6. This cancels. And now it's just a normal two-step equation. So instead of plus 2, we subtract 2 to get 12a equals 4. Divide both sides by 12. So a equals 4/12 will reduce down to 1/3. So it's okay if your answers are fractions. Number 4, we have variables on both sides, but we also have a normal number on both sides, a constant. So you can choose whichever variable you want, but again, I prefer to choose the smallest one. So I'm going to choose this 3k. It's a positive 3k, so I'm going to subtract it from both sides to get 2 plus 2k equals a negative 6. Now it's a two-step equation, trying to get that k by itself, so I'm going to subtract 2 to get 2k equals negative 8. Divide both sides by 2 to get k equals negative 4. Number 5, if I move this 1.3 over, then there's nothing on the left, which means I have to move the 3.3 over. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 3.3c. 1.3c minus 3.3c is negative 2c. equals, this cancels. Then we have 2.8 on the right. Divide both sides by -2 to get C equals 2.8 divided by -2 is -1.4. Number 6, we have some simplifying we can do on the right, so I'm going to do the distributive property over there. So I have 5x plus 5 on the left equals 15x minus 12 minus 10x on the right, so I just did 3 times both of the terms inside of the parentheses. I can still simplify a little bit over here. I can combine my 5x minus 10x to get 5x plus 5 equals 5x minus 12. Okay, so I can choose any variable I want, so I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides, which some of you might already notice what's going to happen. We get 5 equals -12. Now 5 does not equal -12, so we have another no solution. Okay, going to the next page, we have 3 more examples. Okay, number 7, we have some simplifying we can do on the left. So do the distributive property to get 6b minus 3 minus 7 equals 6b minus 10. I can combine my -3 and my -7 to get -10. And then make sure your b really looks like a b and not a 6. And then I'm going to subtract 6b from both sides, and again, some people might notice what's going to happen, but this one's going to be slightly different. We get -10 equals -10, which is true. -10 does equal -10. This means that you could plug in any number for the variable, and it's going to work. So our answer is going to be all real numbers, because we could plug in anything into our variable, and it's going to work. So anytime you end the problem and both sides are completely equal to each other, then you can call it all real numbers. Some of you might have noticed that right here. It says 6b minus 10 equals 6b minus 10, which is exactly the same. So if you notice it at that point, you don't need to actually continue solving it to get to the -10 equals -10 part. Number 8, I have some simplifying to do, and I have some fractions, but that's okay. So do the distributive property on the left. 6 times 5m is 30m. 6 times -3 is -18. 1/3 times 24 is the same thing as 24 divided by 3, so that's 8m. 1/3 times 12 is the same thing as 12 divided by 3, which is 4. Okay, so I don't have any more fractions. I will tell you on your homework there's a problem that does involve a lot of fractions, so take your time with that one. So I have multiple terms on both sides, so I'm going to choose the smallest variable, which is the 8m, so subtract 8m from both sides. And again, you can choose the 30m, you're just going to deal with more negatives. 30m minus 8m is 22m. Bring down your minus 18, your equals, that cancels, and then 4. Add 18 to both sides to get 22m equals 22. Divide both sides by 22 to get m equals 1. Last one, number 9, we have distributive property again. So 1/3 times each of these terms. So 1/3 times 18 is the same thing as 18 divided by 3, which is 6. 1/3 times 12q is the same thing as 12q divided by 3, which is 4q. Then distributive property here to get 12q minus 42. Again, I'm going to choose the smallest variable, which is the 4q, so subtract that from both sides. So we get 6 equals 8q minus 42. Add the 42 to both sides to get 48 equals 8q. Divide both sides by 8 to get q equals 6. Okay, so that one I know was a bit more involved, like that section of notes, especially when you have to deal with fractions. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me.